Welcome back to a new season of The Swing of Things. In this first episode of Season 3, I sit down with Brett Gorman, U.S. Rowing's Director of High Performance Pathways, to discuss U.S. Rowing's Pathways program. Before we hear from Brett, let's get the latest from our friends across the pond, Row 360 editors Tom Ransley and Benedict Tufnell.
Thanks, Amanda. It's good to be back.
Since we last spoke, we've been super busy with the Oxford-Cambridge boat race.
For those of you who don't know, it's the oldest university sporting rivalry in any sport, and it's one of the most known rowing events, certainly in the UK and around large parts of the world. It happens every year between Oxford and Cambridge in London. It's been going on for nearly 200 years, and this year we filmed a behind-the-scenes docu-series, a bit of a shameless plug, but it's on YouTube. On the Boat Race channel. It's called Turning the Tide. So if you're interested, please do check it out.
Fantastic racing as well on the day, and a good day for Cambridge as it turned out, both the men's and the women's being secured by the Light Blues as they did last year.
The Cambridge Light Blues both contained American ex-internationals. Megan Lee rowed for the US, won gold in the women's 8 at the under-23s last summer. And Kenneth Copeland, who was in the men's 8 for Cambridge, he won silver in the men's 8 at the 2021 under-23s. And there's always, there was a few other Americans in the boats, as there always is every year. Always good to see them there.
Their season is done, finished. Ours is just getting going, Ben. We've just been to Varese. The international season's kicked off there, the first World Cup.
Olympic season is officially underway. Started with World Cup 1 last weekend. We were there. The US team wasn't racing, which is fairly standard for a first World Cup of the season. It's a long way for them to travel, and a lot of teams will wait, as the US will, and appear at World Cup 2. But there was still some strong performances throughout.
Not huge numbers, but nevertheless tidy competition and very tight at the top. The Dutch and the British teams dominated. Dutch sneaking ahead on World Cup points, but the British topping the medal table.
So the next thing will be Lucerne for the US. That's first time we see them on the international circuit this year. There'll be two important events happening in Lucerne. First, it will be the final Olympic qualification regatta a few days before the World Cup 2, and that is where athletes will have their final last chance to get their place racing at the Paris Olympics this summer. There's a huge amount of pressure on it. For a lot of them, this will be the absolute pinnacle of their career to get to that Olympic Games, and this is their last chance.
It's going to be the big boats, I think, from the US, which probably are going to have the most interest, arguably. Like the men's and women's quads both narrowly missed out at the World Championships last year, and the men's 8 particularly came 6th, just one place outside of direct qualification. So really looking forward to seeing them at the FOQR going all glory.
It was agonising for them coming 6th. Top 5 went through last summer to the Games, so they need to come in the top 2 in Lucerne at the final Olympic qualification regatta if they're going to get their place at the Olympics this summer. So it really is all to play for them there, and everyone will be gunning for those top 2 spots. And then the weekend after that, we have World Cup 2, where the full US team should be there in force.
That's right, yep. Selection still ongoing for a few boats, but we know for sure that Cara Cola's going to be back in the women's single. She's going to be a strong medal hope for the US come Paris. Likewise, the lightweight women's double, Molly Reckford and Michelle Sexler back together again.
So Molly and Michelle have proven to be a formidable combination in the past, but last summer, Mary Jones actually got the seat with Michelle Sexer, and Molly Reckford moved into the heavyweight women's quad, which was a really interesting decision, but she's obviously done enough to convince Yossi Verdonschot that she should be in that double, so she's back with Michelle, and it'll be really interesting to see what they can do when they lay down their first marker and their sort of intentions for the Olympics later this summer.
That's all we've got from this update.
We'll be back after Lucerne, so we'll be able to report on everything that goes on there, but until next time,
have a good one. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. That was Row 360's Tom Ransley and Benedict Tufnell. Now it's my pleasure to welcome to the show Brett Gorman, who's here to talk all about U.S. Rowing's High Performance Pathways program. Brett, welcome to the swing of things.
Thanks, Amanda. It's great to be here.
Can you start, Brett, by describing your role and what the Pathways program is in a sentence or two for those who haven't heard about the Pathways program?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my technical title is Director of High Performance Pathways. And what that really encompasses is one system that's linking the highest levels of high performance here at US Rowing, which stem from our Chief High Performance Officer, Josie Verdonschot. And I'm responsible for all of the layers below everything that is immediately Olympic. So that Pathways encompasses our U19 national team, our U23 national team, and then, of course, we also have this area between U23s and the senior Olympic level athletes who are exiting under 23s, exiting the collegiate system, and looking to continue the sport at a high level, potentially then moving into our Olympic training pool of athletes that Josie has direct control over.
So how old are the youngest athletes you're engaging with?
Well, right now, we're just finishing up our under 19 identification camps. We ran 13 camps across the country. We have 2 to go. So we've done 11 in locations: Chicago, Detroit, Bay Area, East Coast, West Coast, Oklahoma, and Seattle. And with all of those, we are accepting athletes coming as young as 13 to those camps. Especially our summer camps that we do for the U19s range in age from 14 until 18, 19, depending on what camp you're going to. And so we are seeing 13-year-olds. I am getting emails even from 12-year-olds and middle schoolers. And we have yet to turn anyone away, but we do let them know that they're a little ahead of the curve. They're a little young.
So, Brett, you were on the national team. You won 2 gold medals in 2006 and 2007. And I was hoping you could talk about your pathway, your personal pathway to the national team. How did you get identified? And then what, from your experience, are you bringing to this role, reflecting on both what worked for you and also what didn't?
Sure thing. Yeah. So I was coming through in the early 2000s, late 90s. And at that time, I believe our system was much smaller. And rowing at the high school level hadn't seen the boom that we've seen in, say, the last 10, 15 years. And I was on the West Coast. I wasn't from a traditional East Coast program. And I can't remember how it first started, but, like everyone, I got whatever the rowing magazine at that time was. And back then you would send your scores in, I think, through the mail. You would mail. Yes, you would. Yes, you would actually, write your score down with your name and your address and your phone number. And I didn't have an email address at that time. And you would write your scores down, and I would put it in an envelope and lick it and put a stamp on there and send that in. And then monthly, the magazine they published the top finishers in every age category. So the goal was, can I make the list? Can I get on the list? And so that's how I initially got identified. The first time I tried out for the U19 national team, I did not make it. I got cut. I learned how to row the single. I learned how to get what we call boat feel and was able to make the team that summer. So I was part of the 2001 national team that went and competed in Duisburg. Went on to college after that. Then I left Michigan and then did very well in my single at the fall trials events, and then eventually moved to Princeton and became part of the women's group that was starting there, and was fortunate to be on two successful women's eights that came away with some golds, and then was the alternate for the 2008 Olympic Games. I stayed in the system for 2009 and rode the single for the World Cup system, started coaching, and then transitioned to full heat coaching.
Wow. And is there anything that, when you reflect on this, that you feel like you learned through all of those years in the system that makes it personal for you in terms of what you want to bring to this role?
Ironically, it's, for me, I feel I've almost had to overcome my own personal experience, because for me, it was always automatic, the next step. Well, of course, I'm going to go do this. And of course, I'm a very competitive person innately. And it was never any, I just always found a way, just kind of naturally. And I think that when I first got into coaching, that actually hurt me a lot, because I was dealing with athletes. I was a collegiate coach, and I was dealing with athletes that were not necessarily, the top 5 athletes on the team like I was. They were the athletes that were in, the second varsity 8, the third varsity 8, and even below. And initially, it was really easy for me to think, these athletes aren't motivated because they're not like me. They don't have that drive. And then it kind of dawned on me about year 4 of coaching. Oh, wait, that's my job. it's my job to teach them that. It is my job to, to inspire that and to show, and to also be open to athletes are motivated differently. And because what motivated me isn't going to work for every athlete that I encounter. And I think that that is what I think applies to pathways and why it's plural. And it's not one pathway, because I think you can look at my resume and say, I had a pretty traditional, I did U19s. I did U23. I rode for a top 10 school in college. I went on to the senior team and then I started coaching. Like, of course. And we have to be open to non-traditional pathways and athletes that are motivated for different reasons and want to continue for different reasons.
Because not everyone is that top 5 right away. Not everyone can be.
No, and there are different entry points. Like, I went to a place that happened to have rowing in high school. And I happened to have a mother who knew that that was an opportunity and who knew I didn't want to do PE in the spring and said, hey, why don't you try this rowing thing? Like, just kind of happenstance. It wasn't a natural pathway, but there are so many people that don't have that. Maybe it's not apparent to them till college. They're collegiate walk-ons. I believe, Amanda, weren't you a walk-on?
I was. Yes. Yeah. I had no idea what the sport was about. So yeah, I understand that. Mm-hmm. So one thing that the Pathways program emphasizes is building systems. And in your webinar, you announced where Pathways is announced, you again and again emphasize the importance of athletes using the new athlete profile as part of their U.S. rowing member profile. So it's been a few months since that announcement, and I was hoping you could give us an update on how that's working. How's the uptake? Are you IDing more athletes because of it? And what still needs to be done to improve on that system?
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. That's one of the biggest things that I've been talking about and trying to promote. So the U19s, we're starting to get some traction. I think we've seen about 2,500 athletes complete their athlete profile, which is great. I think the U23, it's a little bit slower going, but we are seeing people start to do it, and it's going to take time. That was one of the things I think in the initial Pathways webinar that we had Yosi on, where he was really talking about patience, and a new system takes time, and we're still figuring it out. So are we IDing more athletes? I will say that we've had, combined with HP Winter Camp and U19 one-day ID camps, we're exceeding our numbers from last year with that alone. So you take that into account, plus the athlete profiles, I think our list is definitely getting longer, and it's just, are we making it easier?
And I believe the deadline for applications for all the summer selection camps is just a few days away. And for those listening to this podcast, it will have passed. So these camps that I just mentioned that we talked about represent all selection opportunities for U19 and U23 athletes looking to make those national teams, as well as looking to be, selected or identified for selection for future teams. Mm-hmm. Is this the first time that all of these camps are organized from the top down, with Yosi Verdonscott, who you mentioned is our head of high performance, leading the process? With
me, yes. I would say last year, 2023 and 2022, that process had started. And Yosi, essentially the U19 selection camp, so the athletes going to Worlds and Canamex, which is the top tier of the U19 system from a competitive standpoint, that got moved over. That's been part of Yosi for the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. What my position does is it links that camp to under 23 camps. It also links it below selection camp for Worlds and Canamex. We have selection development camp, athletes that need a little bit more development. Maybe they need more small boat experience. Maybe their ERG scores aren't quite where we want to see for U19 selection camp, but they have long-term potential. We want to make sure that we still have camps for them. And so those need to be connected to everything. So I would say that 2024 is the first year that, with my position in place, to be able to coordinate all of that. And yes, that is connected all the way to Yosi.
And how do we know about potential, Brett? I mean, you're talking about even 12-year-olds emailing you, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, and they might be strong now, maybe for their age, but is that their max, right? How do we know, or how can we predict, or can we predict what the future might hold for these, especially these really young athletes? I know you were introducing some physiological testing. Is that a part of it? What can we know?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things to say on that. I think Dave O'Neill, who was a keynote speaker at RoCon in 2023, I loved something he said in his talk, which is there's the score, the ERG score, but there's always the story. And because not all ERG scores are created equally, what's the story that goes into that ERG score? How many times when you have a 13-year-old that's showing a pretty good score, how are they achieving that? Have they only been rowing for 6 months and they're a swimmer and it's the second time they've ever done a 2,000 meter ERG test? Or did they start rowing when they were 12 and they've been going on for a while and they're actually at a pretty competitive program that's training a lot of hours, maybe more than they should be? How are they achieving that score is a key part of this. And I think it's hard for us to know that with people just putting scores within the member portal. So that's only going to come through education on how we're educating athletes and parents and coaches on what's appropriate, what people should be doing at those levels. Yosi gave a great talk at the Chasing Excellence Conference in January, where he talked about talent characteristics for what we want to see from ages, I think it's 14 and up is what he had on his chart. And I've had so many people reach out to me being like, can I have the chart? Send me the chart. And I always say, yes, you can have it. But you need to look at both sides. There's the score. And then he also has on there, this is the amount of volume this athlete should be doing to achieve that score. This is how many training sessions they should be doing to achieve that score. It has to be within those parameters. So I think those are a lot of the questions I'm asking. I have a phone call in 3 days with someone who was identified through one of our ID camps, has a very outstanding score for a 13-year-old. And I'm meeting with that athlete and her parents to talk through what's right, because ERG score wise, she potentially qualifies for selection camp, the highest level, and going for a spot at Worlds, which is insane as a 13-year-old.
For the senior team?
No.
Oh,
for the junior team.
Okay.
For the U19 team. But still,
Okay.
I mean,
still,
it's
at
still,
13.
yeah, like going way faster than most of our high school seniors out there. And wow. And I'm going to be asking a lot of questions about what does her training look like? Also, like, what does she want? What are her goals? And what's the short term and what's the long term? Because we want to keep the long term in mind.
And thinking about these athletes, I want to shift to talking about the significant financial commitment per athlete. I think it's, somewhere between, for the U19 selection camps, $4,000 to $6,000. And I know you've been working with Jenny Trays, our Chief Community Engagement Officer, on providing need-based scholarships to athletes. And I know that the deadline is coming up for that as well. Do you have any updates on the amount of support or how that's going? Making sure that there's no financial barrier when there's talent involved. How are we making sure these athletes are not only identified, but supported financially?
Yes. And we have it included in every single application. There's a section for every single application for every layer of our camp that says, do you require scholarship to come to this camp? Here's the link. And it tells them how to fill out that part of the application. I'm not as concerned about people who make their way to the application and then go through that process. What keeps me up at night on this is the athletes who they don't even go to the application. They don't even come to our camps because they've heard or they know it's expensive and it's out of their reach. So that's going to take time. That's every presentation we give, whether it's a webinar, the ID camp presentation, we talk about scholarship. We talk about as many places as we can. I think a lot of it is getting coaches on board as partners. We need them to help us. We need them to help pass this message on when they have someone that through our talent metrics, they see could be competitive at this level, has the desire to be competitive at this level, that they're helping them with that information. Because as you said before, I'm one person.
Right. And speaking of coaches, in the announcement in the webinar, you described how you're going to be building relationships with the colleges as part of Pathways. And this seems like it's an important part of the ID process, given, I imagine, most, if not all of our senior team athletes either came through college rowing or at least they played a sport in college. So college is key. How do we make sure that U.S. Rowing, that we are in touch with these colleges and not just the handful of sort of the go-to regular, the regular go-tos? How are we expanding that? And how can we all help with that?
I think a key thing that is, I don't think it's necessarily a shift because I think we've always felt this way, but we need to be more outward facing with it, is what gaps can we help fill for colleges? I think so many of them, and there's a range, obviously, in every division, whether it's D1, D2, D3 on the women's side, club versus varsity on the men's side. There's a range of resources that different universities have. And some of them have what feels like infinite resources, and some have very, very little. And how, as U.S. Rowing, as the governing body, can we provide assistance to all of those programs for various reasons? How can we give more benefit and more relevant and be more relevant? to colleges. So it's not just us coming to them saying, hey, we want your athletes and we want to take things from you. We want to also give. I think that's a key part of the relationship that we need to spend some time on. And it's not because we haven't and we've just have been kind of selfish about like, oh, we just want to take your athletes and turn and burn them. But how can we really ask our questions on how can we help? How can we take athletes in the summer and accelerate their developments? And when they come back to college, they're even better.
I love that. And then we need more Bretts.
I'm working on that. We've had several job postings for both summer camp positions, also for what I'm calling athlete developer positions to be helping to run these ID camps. Potentially, these people are also coaching the summer, and they need to be people who are very well positioned in our community already so that I can call that one person, that one developer and say, hey, what's happening in the Northwest?
Yeah.
Who are the coaches that I should reach out to? Where are the programs where we're seeing the most athletes coming to ID camps? Where are the programs where we're not seeing anyone come and why?
Right.
Because I don't have that knowledge of every single area and I need help getting that intel.
Yeah. Yeah. So we need more of you. I think we could work on cloning you. And my last question, I don't want to take up your entire evening, is sort of an off the wall idea that you definitely don't have time for, but I can't help but notice, I have a 6'6" son who's 17 and a 6'2" daughter who's 15. They are not rowers. They are volleyball players. So stick with me. This has nothing to do with them. It has to do with the fact that my husband and I, end up all the time at these tournaments around the country. And I am telling you, the girls alone, every court you look at, and there are thousands of kids at these tournaments. I'll just choose this girls tournament last weekend. And they happen all around the country every weekend. Every single court, and there are over 100 courts at many of these tournaments, have multiple girls who are well over 6 feet. And we play this game now like, ooh, number 12. Oh, number 17. She'd be so good. Like big, strong, crazy, strong looking legs. Even better if they're not that great at volleyball. Because then we think, oh, maybe they'd be interested in another sport. Do you ever think about talent ID with these 6'2" girls, for example, or 6'5" boys who maybe don't have a future in whether it's volleyball or swimming or another sport? Do you ever sort of fantasize, because I do, about bringing ergs to these events and just saying, hey, get on here. See how long it takes you to row 500 meters.
I do think about that, Amanda. And I do think, I do think, especially when we need to update this data, but what pre-COVID, before I was working on the education side of U.S. rowing, I was primarily doing under 23 team development, and we crunched a lot of numbers about our Olympians. And, the number of walk-on Olympic medalists for the U.S. in rowing is pretty high. And I wouldn't wager it's changed too much. It maybe has gone down a little bit due to especially the increase in international recruiting and the elimination of, freshman rowing and a lot of walk-on programs that we're seeing. But I definitely have thought a lot about like what testing could we do to potentially capture those athletes. I would do a non-rowing based activity, something everyone can do. The Airdyne bike is all everyone knows how to bike and push their hands back and forth. I would also want to do a personality test.
Oh, here we
serious.
Go.
Yeah,
what would you be looking for? Oh, I bet I know, but I want to hear your answer.
It takes a certain personality that can just sit in a boat or sit on a rowing machine for an extended period of time and
say it, Brett. What kind of personality?
Little crazy.
I like it. I think the personality type is you have to sort of be aligned with that you're okay with a little bit of suffering.
One of our partners at ID camps, before we changed the format, I said, tell me about the ID camps. What do we get out of it? And he said, you know what, Brett, I think we'd get more out of it if we just went on a hard hike.
I think we're onto something. I think we're breaking new ground here tonight. Well, I'm gonna let you get to dinner and feeding your own little ones there. And, I'd say, I do want to say that we'll be coming back to you because I'd love to continue this conversation and hear how the summer camps go. And just, this is, like you said earlier, this is a process, right? This isn't months, this is years, and it's a journey. And we're so lucky to have you leading us on this journey, but love to check in, after the summer and get your feedback on how you think things are going, and just would love to hear from our listeners too on this conversation, and just really grateful to you for all the work you're doing as one person and, for your time tonight too.
Yeah, thank you. And I know I'm kind of the outward face of it, but there are a lot of people that assist with Pathways, and and I'm so thankful for the support of you and Rich Cacioppo, and then of course Yosi, like he's so willing to share and take time with our U19 coaches on training and to make sure that we can have these linkages. Chris Chase, Chris Furlow, and Steph Fire, who run our lower down camps. It's a team. It is a team effort. We keep saying I'm alone, but there are others that are assisting, and I'm very appreciative of all of them.
Well, thank you so much, Brett.
Thank you, Amanda. Appreciate it.
That's all for our conversation today. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Brett. Before we end the show, let's get a quick update from one of U.S. Rowing's national team athletes, Justin Best. His four won a silver medal last summer at World Rowing Championships, and that same boat is now preparing for the Olympics in Paris this summer. Hi, Justin. It's great to see you again.
It's great to see you too, Amanda.
So are you back in Princeton now?
Yes, we are back in Princeton. We just finished up a really big training block down in Sarasota. The team is all kind of reconvening here this week. This past week, we kind of had an on-your-own training setup, so everyone kind of went to wherever they were. I was fortunate enough, I got to go back to my parents' house outside of Philadelphia. So I got to do some of my local haunts, good restaurants and whatnot, in addition to just kind of mellowing out some of the training before we get into this next training block.
So you are in the men's four that won silver at Worlds in Belgrade. And that boat has been kept together, I should say, maybe put together, taken apart, put back together. I don't know how we frame that. What do we say?
I'd say, kept together. We did have to, trial with a couple of different other people, but I think kept together would be a good way of putting that. I was fortunate enough to be selected last year to the boat. I think we had a really good chemistry, and the campaign paid off in the end. And I think we continued that. We kind of had that goal of, all right, let's see what we can do if we have an actual, full year of training together. And we went through selection camp. It was a pretty quick process for us because there wasn't as many seats to, interchange, but we're super excited, and we've been in that lineup for the last few weeks. And I think one thing that I particularly like about this crew is when we want to step on it, we can change our speed pretty quickly. The goal now is, I guess, to work on our base speed, so we can get really, really good max speed if we, go off of a start or we're doing a burst. But I think that the primary goal is how do we elongate our base speed so that we have a complete 2,000 meter piece. But that's the fun part of the crew, is we can just, if we really want to turn it on, we can.
Yeah, clearly we've seen that. And if a boat had a personality, I mean, how would you describe the personality of this boat, this four?
I would say hungry. I think that's the best word that I can describe it. I think all of us have this incredible buy-in, which is what you want in a crew, especially in a long campaign, and realizing, yes, it's going to be difficult and you're in a training block. But I think the experience that we've had leading up to how we ended up in our seats is relatively similar in terms of, okay, we were on the national team before, we went to Tokyo, we didn't have the necessarily performance that we wanted to have. And that kind of internal fire drives us. And I think we see it in the work that we do. And we have a crew charter that we abide by, that we've collectively put together. And we have a lot of goals in mind. And I think it's a good group of guys that we all can joke and kid with each other and hang out and whatnot, but we also aren't afraid to hold each other accountable, which again, there's an appropriate way to do that. And I think all of us strike that balance. So I think, we're hungry, we're ready for it. And I think it's a good group that we're working with right now.
That's great. And there's a crew charter. Who put that together? Whose idea was that?
Liam sat us down. So we had a little boat meeting before everything got kicked off. And he's like, all right, let's go through our crew charter. And we kind of collaborated and put it together. But we'll keep that under lock and key for now. And then once the competition's over, I can share it with what we did.
That's great. That's great. Well, it's such an amazing boat to watch, and such a great group of guys. And you have a lot of fans and a lot of people behind you, all four of you, and really appreciate the time you took today to just chat with, our listeners and all the fans that you have out there.
Of course. And I'm so happy that, one, people will be able to show up to Paris this time and support. And then two, the outpouring of support from the community, from, junior teams and high schoolers all the way to masters and the entire U.S. rowing community. I really feel like that support is there. And it's just an incredible time. And I'm going to do my part, hopefully, and keep working hard to hopefully have a result for everyone watching.
No doubt you will, and you're just amazing role models for our young rowers out there too. I know they look up to you, and for good reason. So thank you for everything you're doing. And we will. Well, I'll see you before Paris. I think I'll see you this week, but we'll be seeing a lot of you. And thank you, Justin.
Of course.
And that's all for this episode of The Swing of Things. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Next time, I'll be speaking with World Rowing's Executive Director, Vincent Gaillard. I hope you'll join us. Remember to like, share, and follow from wherever you get your podcasts. It helps others to find us. And please subscribe to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Thanks for listening.